When making a decision for your company, what do you trust the most? The numbers or your gut? As technology improves across businesses and industries, we hear more and more that data-driven decision-making is king or queen. But what about the other, often softer skills that can be crucial to business success? For Sibella Court, one of Australia's most sought-after interior designers and stylists, it's those skills that have been the compass for her career.
I had been styling for 16 years. Just started dreaming up this idea that I could open a shop. I didn't have a business plan or really care about the projections or all of those sorts of things.
Sibella's career started in magazines, working for Vogue and Marie Claire here in Australia before moving to New York, where she collaborated with global brands like Bergdorf Goodman, Donna Karan and Saks Fifth Avenue. She returned to Sydney in 2008 and opened her dream store, The Society Inc., selling homewares and goods alongside her styling and design services. It may seem foreign to those of us who live and die by spreadsheets and statistics, but Sibella's intuitive approach to marketing and business growth has seen her go from strength to strength. She's collaborated with some of Australia's finest hotels and restaurants, published best-selling design books, and even hosted ABC's Restoration Australia. So what is the secret to Sibella's organic success?
I do think the socialising is a really big part of it. I don't socialise as much now, but anytime I do, something comes out of it. It's a casual passing, a casual conversation that sticks with someone or sticks with you, and a seed is planted and something always comes of it.
I'm Dr. Juliette Burke, an adjunct professor in the School of Management and Governance at the UNSW Business School. You're listening to The Business Of. So Sibella, how did your early experience, especially working with big brands in New York, shape your understanding of the business of design?
I started in magazines. I started at Vogue and then on Marie Claire Lifestyle as an editor at a very young age. We ran on skeleton staff, which was beautiful. And you did learn to do jack of all trades. I mean, with that, you become very good at doing everything. And I think going to New York, that is an incredible education because you can run a small business because you've learned how to do that on the smell of an oily rag. And then going to New York, you have these much bigger teams. And I think that's what you have to navigate more of how to manage the communication, manage the scheduling, the logistics. You know, if I was doing a Donna Karan advertising photo shoot, I mean, we'd be shooting at Pier 59 in this massive 2,000 square foot studio. I would have 6 prop tables. I would have propped for days all over the city, gone to every single shop. There was not online then. You were going to everywhere. I was finding every single background. I never left any stone unturned. And then on the day would be, you know, picking and choosing. I was shooting with amazing photographers. You would have the creative director, the marketing director, you know, you would have the photo editor there. You would have a photographer would have 4 assistants and I would have 3 assistants. You know, we're working with these very large groups of people and you'd have to learn how to navigate that without getting too worried about the dilution of the creative process because coming from Australia on these skeleton teams, you had a very focused creative output that didn't have a lot of other people's input.
And that industry, you know, it has this sense of exclusiveness about it and allure. How do you build a profile for yourself in that industry? What did you do?
I mean, you know, I was so lucky to be a part of the early 90s in the magazine world in Australia. We had incredible magazines and they were being watched by everyone overseas. And I think a big change for me was when Karen McCartney came over and she was the editor of Marie Claire Lifestyle. And I worked on that from the get-go. And I teamed up with Donna Hay, who's one of my dear friends, and we'd been shooting in the same studio. And we teamed up as interiors and food, which hadn't really been done before. I mean, there were some of the English magazines that were doing it under Ilse Crawford, but we had this different way of looking at it, and we would hire fashion photographers to shoot our food and interiors. So it had a completely different look, and we were doing something completely different. So when I did end up in New York, I would go to, photographers' meetings or any sort of art direction meeting, and they would have all my spreadsheets out. And they were looking at Australia to what we were doing, and they were admiring it and wanting it.
I often think about that with Australia. We're a small market, but we're a mature market. We're doing things on the smell of an oily rag. And we can come up with these amazing innovations, and we're quite adept at, early adoption as well. You said, though, when you went to the US, you learned a whole lot of things about scale and dealing with people. So they liked your creativity, but it was the
business side. Absolutely the business side. I mean, within that, of course you met other great creatives that you could spark with that, helped you grow into a better designer or a better stylist and have a different kind of eye, and, you expand as a person, you travel more, you see more things, but definitely that fine-tuning of business is so very different to here.
So you ended up leaving New York in 2008, returning to Sydney to launch your own design studio, the Society Inc. I've seen it described as a haberdashery meets hardware store. What was the catalyst for opening that space?
I had been styling for 16 years when I was in New York, and I had an amazing friend, James Merrill, photographer, English photographer, who I've done many a shoot with. And we just started dreaming up this idea that I could open a shop. There was incredible new ways of looking at retail that was happening around that time in New York. So you had Donna Karan open her flagship store up on Fifth Avenue that had a turntable in it and a juice bar, and it had books that you could read alongside her fashion. People were just doing this new way of retail that I was like, I'm kind of done with styling. I mean, I could shoot up to 5 shoots a week, and each one had a truck that followed them. It was like this traveling circus that you packed and unpacked on a daily basis. It was exhausting. Like absolutely exhausting. Every stylist knows about stylist back. Everyone has a terrible back from doing it because you're impatient, there's no time, you're there moving 3-meter sofas on your own, you're doing all sorts of things. So I was just thinking, what's next? And you get to meet the most incredible people because you're borrowing pieces from artists, new makers. The products are incredible, the wallpapers, the paint, and everyone everywhere, all over the world. But I was like, I want to showcase all these people. I want to do a shop. So I started looking for that shop in New York. And I had one that I was working on a lease in Soho, and then came home for a quick trip to see my family. And when I got home, I was like, well, I'm not doing it. I'm moving home. Within it was 48 hours. It was the strangest thing.
What was that about?
I don't know. I think it was that time in August when you get those couple of weeks where you can smell summer, glorious weather. I went down south, I was swimming, I was running on the beach, and I was with all these friends, and I was just like, what am I doing? I'm coming back here. This is amazing. And having this really beautiful idea of owning a shop and what that could look like, it didn't matter where it really opened. So I actually decided and then went back to New York and packed everything up and moved back in the December.
Wow.
Yeah.
I sometimes think we forget that. We think businesses are just all about an intellectual decision, a sort of a cash flow projection, a new business model, but actually there's someone like you that's the beating heart of that business. And if your beating heart is now in Australia, that's where the business is.
That's where the business is, and I just, changed it.
So how did that work in terms of, I know you said your contacts were global, but I imagine that a lot of them were US based.
They were. And I had been collecting stock as well. So I had 3 storage spaces in New York, and they were full to the rafters of old props and stock and all sorts of things. So I got these amazing packers in, and they shipped it home, and I had stock for my shop for 3 years because also the GFC hit and we went into a recession.
Right. So you didn't have any
didn't- I-
cash problems
No,
then.
I didn't have to buy a single thing.
And how did you weather that storm? What happened with that retail business?
Well, the retail, as you've probably picked up, I didn't have a business plan or really care about the projections or all of those sorts of things. I ended up buying a building in Paddington that was an old shop downstairs, and I lived upstairs. And so it suited my purposes beautifully. And so I was able to open that quite quickly. And at the same time, I had also sort of signed up with Justin Hemmes at Merivale to work on all of his restaurants and businesses. So we were designing and opening all sorts of things as well together.
how did you develop those relationships coming back after being away for such a long
Yeah.
time?
Well, I'd met him back in the August and he was opening Ivy, and then we kept chatting because, I knew a lot about restaurants. I'd been eating out, I think 3 times a week for about the last 20 years. And I had worked all over the world shooting hotels and restaurants. So he just kept chatting to me about working with him on his projects because I came from, I suppose, a little bit of a different background to a traditional interior designer with that styling background. I mean, I built enormous sets in New York. We did create apartments and all sorts of other stuff, but it was, done with hot glue and a cable tie, not nails,
No
other
longevity.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah, not longevity. We had to pull it down in the afternoon. But coming from that different point of view, I think was really interesting at a time when stylists didn't work on restaurants. So we created a new DNA in the hospitality field.
And how did he find out about you?
I met him at a restaurant.
And
I don't know. I can't remember how it happened. I mean, I had a lot of energy and a lot of ideas, but none of the steps that I've taken in my career are particularly, they're not really thought about. Maybe it's just a good timing is a big part of it as well.
yeah, they sound organic.
It's all very organic.
But then you have to be in the space. You have to be putting that energy out there. You have to be having 100 meetings, 100 dinners. You're saying you're going out 3 times a week, and it just so happens that one of those nights out in Australia, he
Yeah.
happens to be in the same restaurant.
Yeah. Mm.
Are there other suggestions you would have to people how they build relationships so they can get their brand out there?
I do think the socialising is a really big part of it. I don't socialise as much now. I live down south. I work in the city, but I don't go out at night as much. But anytime I do, something comes out of it. It's a casual passing, a casual conversation that sticks with someone or sticks with you. And, a seed is planted and something always comes of it.
How do
Always
you
comes
do
of
that?
it.
So that's not naff. That you don't want to be a human business card.
I suppose with me, I'm not that targeted. So we're always having casual conversations. Ask whoever you're talking to a lot of questions, and that's always interesting. But it could be going to an art opening. It could be going to Sydney Contemporary opening night. It could be, but open to be talking to strangers as well, or gallerists or furniture makers or whatever that may be. I mean, there's so many events that you can go to or lists that you can get on, particularly for the galleries and things like that. And there's always interesting people to talk to, endlessly interesting people to talk to.
I think I hear 2 things from you. One is that it's a bit about luck, but you make your own luck.
You certainly do.
And the other is your focus on the other person. So you're not thinking of yourself as going there selling work. You're thinking of just meeting an interesting person.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I do surround myself with makers as well, and they're all so integral to my design process. And I think when you build that community too, your name is interwoven with a certain type of craftsmanship. So whether that's a sign writer or a blacksmith or a weaver or an artist or a upholsterer, or they're my kind of industry things. You can pick your industry things that are really special.
But really, they're your distribution network, your marketing channel, more your marketing channel.
Yeah.
And not
we
directly.
and we celebrate one another.
Oh, right. You're their marketing channel too. Hey, I can bring this weaver in.
What Sibella just described is what academics call planned serendipity.
That's Professor Barney Tan. He says successful businesses often lay the foundation for what's seen as good luck with strategic planning.
In reality, a lot of what looks like luck is actually the result of systems and groundwork that create conditions for good fortune to happen. It's about creating the conditions for intuition to thrive, and Sibella's journey illustrates this perfectly. Her ability to pivot, take creative leaps, and say yes to the right opportunities didn't come out of nowhere. It was underpinned by a strong foundation. Her craft, her network, her identity as a designer, that foundation gives her intuition something to land on. This idea of planned serendipity also came through clearly in my own research on a Vietnamese fintech startup called MomoPay. Well, the founders there were often described as unusually lucky. They always seemed to be able to sense market shifts and regulatory changes before anyone else did. But when we studied them closely, what we found was a deep strategic infrastructure that supported their intuition. They invested in sensing capabilities, they stayed close to both customers and policymakers, and they fostered a culture of real-time information sharing. So when something unexpected happened, they were already primed to act. It's the same with creative businesses. What looks like a stroke of genius is usually supported by deep experience, clear values, and the willingness to act when a hunch arises. Intuition by itself isn't enough. It only becomes valuable when you've done the prep work that lets you trust it and act on it. That's why I think Sibella's story resonates so much. Her ability to seize opportunities, to pivot with confidence. It's not luck in the chaotic, random sense. It's planned serendipity. It's what happens when intuition meets preparation.
The other thing I want to ask you about the Society Inc. was that you had a whole lot of different products and offerings under one brand.
Umbrella. Yeah.
Right. So how did you create consistency between them?
Well, there was two sides to the business. So it cradles sort of the Sibella Corp brand as well as the Society Inc. brand. The Society Inc. brand was the hardware and homewares, anything that could be sold on to a customer that would sit on our retail site. And also we did a lot of wholesale. And then on the other side of that, under the Sibella Corp brand, would be my manufacturing collaborations. So they're with Australian manufacturers and their products that they sell. I design them and they sell them through their streams. So they're quite a different way of designing because they take all the manufacturing responsibility and sales responsibility.
You decided to close down the Society Inc. in 2023 after running that business for 15 years. How did you know it was the right time?
I don't know if you ever know exactly when the right time is, but we did have a looming deadline that ended up being time appropriate. The building I'd been in for 10 years was getting demolished. So I had to go through that enormous collection. I don't know if you visited there, but I have been collecting since I was about 18 years old, and it housed my enormous object library and collection of things, and I had to get them out of there. So I did 4 Lawson's auctions and sold thousands and thousands of my objects that I had collected for such a long time. So there was this lead up to that. And then I think it just almost organically happened, even though it'd been in the back of my mind that this was going to happen soon. The redevelopment of that amazing old warehouse and the whole precinct being demolished was a big part of it.
That would make sense to me, though, because you're such a physical person. You've got your hands on the materials, and letting go of these treasures might have enabled you to let go of the business.
The business. Oh, it absolutely did. And it was very freeing once it was done. Yeah. It's always silver linings.
And from what I understand, there were also some personal reasons that factored into the decision to close. Can I ask about that?
My partner was my husband as well. And, our relationship fell apart, and as did the business. And it was unraveling over quite a few years, and I was holding up the whole business and running the whole thing. I mean, it was such a beast, and, that partnership didn't work anymore.
What are your learnings now about going into business with other people? Would you do it again?
I probably would do it again, yes. I just might have a few more rules around it. Rules around how you can both get out of it. Right. Really, one person can take it over and the other exits.
I think that's a really interesting thing. It's almost what you're talking about as a prenup. that you go
it is.
into, because it is a relationship
Yeah.
with someone.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be talking about when this relationship ends, but you kind of need to.
You need to. I think you know what, that prenup, that's fantastic. I think that's fantastic advice. Go into it like it's a prenup.
How did that work from a revenue stream perspective? Letting go of one business, how are you going to make money?
So, as I mentioned before, that umbrella of the Society Inc. had quite a few revenue streams already. One half was the hardware business, and it took up about 65% of my time, but I never drew a wage from it. So all the other things that I did under Sabella Court, which was the ambassador roles, all my interior design projects, and all the manufacturing collaborations. So they were my biggest earners, regardless. And then the books and any television are all under that side.
Speaking of books and television, you hosted ABC's Restoration Australia. I look at shows like that where you're basically empowering Australian audiences to have a go themselves. And I wonder, what does that do to a business model where you teach someone else how to be a good stylist? Because they're going to eat your breakfast.
Restoration Australia, I didn't have any contribution into how these people finished their homes. I was literally there to document their journey. And they were beautiful journeys. So however they wanted to live in their house, they can live in their house. But I think my books were a bigger guide to how you could decorate your home, more so than the television show. But I am such a big believer in passing confidence or trying to hold someone's hand to give them a bit more confidence to surround themselves with the things that they love.
Yeah, and
and there's enough work for everyone.
That's right. I was kind of going to, does it actually create work for you? Do books create a market, or do they diminish your own market because people will do it?
Oh, I only did books because I love books. I have 3 libraries. I prefer books over digital any day. And I did the books because I loved the books, and I didn't do it to serve any other purpose. If you go into doing books thinking you're going to make a fortune, you will be bitterly disappointed. But they become this incredible accidental marketing tool. I didn't know that at the time, but they do, and they have longevity.
I'm just thinking about your current venture, this Sabella Court Studio, and it's streamlined. You've got the styling, you've got the design services, as well as these makers creating the products for you. And the new technology out there, AI apps, you see them in different ways, you've got a carpet and you put it in a 3D so you can imagine it. How do you see your business intersecting with that new technology?
We don't use AI in that way, but I have been playing around with it with a friend of mine, Joshua Yeldum, putting photographs into AI. So I largely design hotels, a lot of them remote, and we work with really big teams. So I'll often be a lead creative, and then there'll be an interior design team, another architectural team, a lead architect, and then there'll be up to 100 consultants underneath that. And we work from master plan. So, they're very large, complicated jobs. So the AI we're using at the moment is usually to record all of our WIPs, which are huge and long and lengthy with many people, and it writes the minutes for us, and then it tells us all what to do. So that has been an incredible saver. When I was playing around with Josh the other day, we actually put into AI, create an interior design that looks like it's in Paris, in dark lighting, designed by Sabella Court with the Joshua Yeldum owl painting on the wall. And it came out and it created this incredible render. The space they created, I would never design a space like that. Like, they got it so wrong. But it was incredible. I never say never, but in my career lifetime, I doubt that a space that I could create would be created by AI and a client's going to take that. I think the curation role will never go away. I mean, the process of time and the beauty it creates, it cannot be created in a digital world. I mean, if I'm doing, a hotel or whatever interior space I'm designing, 50% of it is artisan made, whether that's custom or bespoke. 40% is probably vintage. And then this tiny little 10% is off the shelf. So how are they going to make something that is made by my blacksmith or done gold leaf by my sign writer. And then the other parts are all embedded with the past histories in vintage furniture that has all the nicks and scratches, that tells its stories, that gives a space something you can't see but you can feel.
Is there a hint for the future here of design? And that is, the more that you show the reality of something, the more you show its history, the more interesting is. And it almost creates this larger division between AI and futuristic technology and the humans that we are.
I think so. And it will take over. I mean, it might take over all the design for kit homes that are all shiny and new.
But not for nostalgic Sibella.
No.
So what does the future look like for AI integration in creative industries? Here's Professor Barney Tan again.
When it comes to AI use in creative industries, research shows that there are inherent tensions. On one hand, from the perspective of the firms that need design, whether that's marketing teams, e-commerce platforms, or publishers, AI tools offer incredible efficiency. You can generate 10 versions of a visual in minutes, iterate rapidly, and bring production costs down. So there's a strong temptation to see AI as a way to replace designers or at least reduce reliance on them. But then there's the other side, the stakeholder response. And this is where things get tricky. When customers find out a design or even a broader product experience was generated by AI, their perception of authenticity can drop. People value the human touch, especially in areas like branding, interior design, or any domain where emotion, identity, and personal tastes are at play. If something feels too perfect or too artificial, it risks coming off as sterile or mass-produced. My recent research on the use of AI in the Korean creative industry really brought this tension to light. Now, we looked at how creative firms in Korea were adopting generative AI and found that the success of those firms depended less on the tech itself and more on the design of the interactions around it. Firms that succeeded weren't just using AI behind the scenes. They were thinking about how the technology would be received by users, clients, and even their own designers. Some were upfront about using AI to generate drafts or support ideation, while others chose to mask its presence and use entirely to preserve a more handcrafted feel. And it also depends on what exactly is being created. For instance, many customers might feel it's perfectly acceptable to use AI to design something like a company logo. It's clean, it's functional, and the emotional connection is often limited. But imagine if this podcast was entirely generated by AI. No human host, no real voices, just synthetic speech and machine-written scripts. That would feel uncanny, even off-putting, because the value here comes from personality, it comes from empathy and real-life experiences that we're sharing. So the same tool used in similar ways, but you get very different reactions based on the context. What was fascinating in our study was also how firms navigated this emotional terrain. They weren't just asking, can this be automated? But also, should it be? So that ethical and aesthetic consideration shaped everything from the tools they used to the way they presented the final work to clients. So the question becomes, where do we draw the line? What parts of the creative process are okay to automate, and which ones are essential for preserving a sense of meaning and trust? Some companies bring their customers into the process, being transparent about using AI and inviting feedback. Others keep it in the background and use it to enhance workflows without changing the front-facing experience. That's the challenge for businesses today. AI can absolutely streamline production, but the creative economy is still built on trust, taste, and storytelling. If we lose that, no amount of automation will bring the audience back. The opportunity lies not in replacing creativity, but in designing around it, thoughtfully and with intent.
Thanks to Sibella Court for joining us on this episode. Learn more about blending creativity and commerciality in our conversation with Alexandra Smart.
I think large organisations now not only require but desire leaders who can think creatively, think quickly, think in a dynamic way with an element of risk to get things done. They require leaders like that, but often it's just not the culture or not the way things are done.
You'll find that linked in our episode description. The Business Of is brought to you by the University of New South Wales Business School, produced with Dead Set Studios.